But I'm Ash.
I'm Al.
We are Vie Cosplay.
And this is Shit Cosplayers Say. And today we have a very special guest, not our executive producer, although he is here. You will probably hear him. He's chatty today.
He is very special, but he is not our guest.
He is not our guest. We have Laughing Rat Cosplay as our guest today.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hello. So we have brought Beth in to talk about a very special topic. The history of cosplay.
The mysterious origins.
Mysterious origins.
The mysterious origins of cosplay.
So I do have to know, what made you decide that you wanted to research and then present on this topic?
I think, I have like a lot of kind of frustrated intellectual energy because I was like, my goal in life originally was to go get my PhD in English literature and like, teach 18th century satire and humor writing. But I made the terrible decision to graduate in 2007. And we all know what happened right about then. When the bottom went out on, pursuing higher academia in the humanities and the arts, I decided maybe we should go do something else, which is when I started cosplaying. I think I saw an article on some website, I want to say Cracked, where it had some of the early photos of just early sci-fi fandom nerd stuff. And it had some of the early cosplayers. And I was like, well, that's interesting. Let's find out more about that. And then it was just Alice down the rabbit hole, finding out all these just fascinating and bizarre factoids about this hobby that we all share. And I eventually decided, well, I should probably share some of this stuff. So I put together my panel. It's called Cosplay: A History, and I've done it at a number of conventions throughout the Midwest. And it's one of those projects that's always kind of growing. When I find new information, I add it in. I'll change things when I get a better understanding of something. And it's just become kind of a fun little side project for me.
Fun. Now, you mentioned 18th century literature?
18th
correct?
Century, yes.
So is that a particular century that you're more so fond of than others, or?
From a literary standpoint, yes. I was an English major, and it's a really interesting period. I think my professors would say because of all of the economic growth and wealth that was coming into especially Britain and France in the 18th century. It was the period when the middle class developed. This is when we get a lot of novels start developing at this time period. You've got stuff like Robinson Crusoe, you've got Samuel Fielding, Henry Fielding, Samuel Richardson. I'm throwing out all these names that people who haven't studied this stuff are not going to know at all.
Somebody somewhere is geeking out with you right now.
Yes, but it's this fascinating time period where a whole new class is developing socioeconomically, and of course, it's all based on the backs of colonialism. This is colonialism time, and I'm kind of pulling off of the good stuff that came out of the colonialism in Britain and France, at least literarily, and it's just there's so much growth. I don't really want to get too deep into it because I don't want to lose you, but it's just this extremely vibrant period of new techniques in literature and new approaches to writing, and of course the printing press is firing things off as fast as it possibly can. So people have more access to literature than they've ever had before. So yeah, it's a very interesting, fun time period.
Good deal. I know one thing that a lot of people, if they've seen you pop up on their feeds recently, it's probably involved in some of your more historical type costuming, like your Victorian era kimono gown.
My baby.
Did you want to talk about that a little bit?
Oh, Lord, don't get me started.
Another rabbit hole.
Yes. Is this going to be all? I'm not sure if they're rabbit holes or gopher holes at this point, but
we love tangents. It's fine.
Tangents are beautiful.
They're beautiful.
Tangents are where you discover new things. So this gown that I made is based off of an extant garment, which is in the FIDM museum in Los Angeles. It's a tea gown, which is very popular in about the 80s. It was a sort of garment that a lady would wear when she was at home and needed to be dressed appropriately to receive visitors, but was not planning on going out herself. So I tell people it's kind of like, it's the Victorian equivalent of sweatpants.
I love it.
Yes. And this particular gown happened to be made out of reclaimed kimono fabric. So it has these absolutely gorgeous furisode sleeves. It kept the original lining intact. And it's got this beautiful train of the kimono fabric just going down the back. And I fell in love with this dress in like 2012, but I didn't have the sewing skills required to make one for myself yet. But then the pandemic happened, and I decided that maybe I did have the sewing skills required. So I started putting together the research and finding the patterns, and got myself an old furisode kimono from Tangerine Mountain. Took it apart, Frankensteined it back together, and now I have this full Victorian small wardrobe where I've got petticoats, I've got a corset, I've got a chemise, I've got a bustle pad, I've got a balayage, which is maybe my favorite part because it's just such an ingenious device. A balayage is basically a dust ruffle that you attach to the inside of a long skirt that protects the hem of the train of something that may be unwashable, like, say, kimono silk. Protects it from dirt. When it gets dirty, you pop it off, you throw it in the wash, and then your train stays clean. Your balayage comes out of the wash, you put it back on, you're good to go again. And it was just so much. It was so much fun. It was a real labor of love kind of project.
It's definitely stunning. Hopefully, if you don't mind, we'll put a picture of that in the post for this episode.
No, feel free.
People can see it. But it's a very beautiful gown. And you make a lot of really fun, like, your own design and creations of different characters. And is there anything else fun you want our listeners to know about you? Why are you called Laughing Rat?
Why am I called Laughing Rat?
Yes.
It definitely has nothing to do with the fact that I have 13 pet rats. No,
never.
Not 13. No, 15. I was gonna have 13.
You were gifted to.
But then one of them happened to have a little surprise pocket with 2 extra rats inside of it. It was like that puppy surprise toy from the 90s where you don't know how many you're gonna get.
Yes. You had no idea she was pregnant, right? When you got her?
No idea. Well, she was only about, when I brought her home in August, she was about 3 months old. So she was barely a baby herself. And I brought her home, and I'm getting her cage ready to get her ready to quarantine and get her settled in. And I take a look, and there is an extra foot poking out from under this rat. And I'm like, oh, dear God. Because I've had rats since like 2001-ish. So I'm on 20 years of rat keeping now, and I've never had a single litter. And I'm actually quite proud of myself for that. But I bring her home. Her name's Sweet Pea. She ended up having 2 babies, a boy and a girl. Their names are Snow Pea and Jelly Bean. And it's been a real fun adventure.
They're so cute.
They're so darling.
They're
oh my God.
cute.
I got to kiss them before they were even 1 day old. I got them out, and I was like, real quick, and I gave them back to their mom so she wouldn't get mad at me.
They are the most domesticated of rats. Your little guys are out running around right now, aren't they?
They are. Some of them are.
Some of them.
The Sweet Pea and her daughter Snow Pea are out. My girl Spork is out. Is Seamus, who shows up on my Instagram a lot. He has kind of his own little fan club. And then my 2 girls, Chromie and Onyxia, are out, and they may put in an appearance if they feel like it.
Who stole the Snickers bar the other day?
That was Lila. She is she's my gray girl. Has the softest fur of any rat I've ever met. I apparently left a Snickers bar in a bag that I brought home from a convention. I threw it on the couch, not even thinking, and a couple hours later, here comes Lila bouncing by. Look what I got, Mom. You can't catch me. I'm taking this behind the couch. I never saw that Snickers bar again.
Snuck it away. She snuck it away. We gotta know, how did the adventure known as cosplay start? Because I thought it started in Japan, and it turns out it didn't.
It kind of didn't. It actually,
Okay.
not even just kind of didn't. It actually didn't. Um, it also got started a lot earlier than people think. When you talk about the history of cosplay, it is so tied into the development of fandom that you kind of can't separate the two. Fandom really got its start in about the late 1800s, early 1900s. You've got a couple of proto fandoms that show up. Jane Austen's novels had people getting together in salons to discuss her novels. Famously, there was Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's fans who bullied him into bringing Sherlock Holmes back after he fell over the Reichenbach Falls.
It's good to know that nerds have been using their powers for good for this long.
We've been doing this for a long time. We got Sherlock Holmes back, and then they got the Snyder cut out of it. But the fandom as we know it and understand it today really grew out of science fiction fandom in the early 20th century. And that was a lot of really young nerds, really, really passionate people just coming together and really sharing their love for this entirely new genre of fiction. And they started actually getting together in what would become conventions. There's a little bit of debate over exactly when the first convention was. It was either in Leeds, England, in I think 1928, 29, or I was in Pittsburgh a year or two after that. I've got that date wrong. I can look it up if you want me to, but
I just didn't realize they had started that early, because the first ones I had heard of were more like the 1970s.
The 70s, the convention culture was actually very well established in the 1970s, because that's when you start getting the Star Trek conventions.
Yes.
And Comic-Con comes out of that time period. But the science fiction conventions that kind of developed the model that we still use to this day really came out of the really late 20s, early 1930s.
Who visited you?
It's Seamus.
Hi again, friend.
Say hi, Mr.
little
Man.
He wants to be on the podcast.
He wants to be a guest too.
Hi, Seamus.
Yeah. He's very into butt scritches today, so he has been stopping by a lot to get his butt scratched.
Do you help Mom make things like the
He
cats
does.
do? Yeah.
Yeah, he's very helpful. He likes to steal my fabric scraps.
Yes.
He is a hoarder.
Yeah, you probably end up
Me
with
too,
like
buddy.
piles of fabrics and all, because they're just known for hoarding things, aren't they?
Oh yeah.
You probably build like a little nest out of like fabric scraps.
Sometimes fabric I don't necessarily want him to have. Yeah.
Always. That's like the cat only wants the pattern paper you're using, not the scraps that you're not. Yeah, that's how that goes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we were talking about how cons actually started in the 1920s.
20s, either in Leeds, England, or there was also an event in Pittsburgh. Was it Pittsburgh or Philadelphia? It was one of the two. It started with a P, where basically it was a dozen or so fans from Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, one of those two, and New York took a train, met together at a bar, somebody took notes, and that was considered the first American convention. And out of that grew what became known as the first World Science Fiction Convention, which was held in 1939. Those in the know may be aware that that was the first Worldcon, which still runs to this day, is going to be in Chicago next year. It's the longest continuously running science fiction convention in the world, and is also one of the major players in the international cosplay scene. I've got a rat in my hands right now, and he is just loving his life because I'm scritching his butt, and he is so happy.
He's so happy.
Man.
Oh, happy.
Yeah, Worldcon's been on our list on and off. It unfortunately always falls when we can't go.
Yeah, it's going to be next year, September.
Yep. We'll
6th or 7th-ish.
That's like a week before Spain.
Oh, Jesus.
A week or two before, so we won't
Yeah.
make it again.
It's the weekend before
Yeah.
D23 for me. So so I'm hoping to go for
Ugh.
one day. I want to go for one day.
I mean,
There's-
at least like Chicago's not that far.
it's an Amtrak visit for me, and
Right.
that's not terrible.
I think technically it's also an Amtrak visit for us if we really want to.
A longer one than it is for me, I think.
Yeah, because we could take the Amtrak straight from here.
Or we could just drive 3 hours. I mean,
I guess it depends
You
on
have
if
to
you
park
really
in
want to
Chicago,
drive or
though.
not.
Like
That's
it's going to be in the
true.
heart of downtown, and that's
yeah,
like
we drive into C2 and pay the stupid parking.
yeah.
It makes me cry every time we get our parking bill after C2 because it's like
The
$45 a night or something. R.I.P.
Are you just living that moment over and over again in your dreams?
The $114
yes.
we spent on parking? Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes, I remember the exact number.
And it's
we
traumatizing
spent
every
on
single time.
parking, and it makes me upset because we didn't even move our car. It just
Nope.
sat there. But they
Well,
were
and we could take the train in, but the schedules just don't.
no,
Mesh.
it's not worth it. It's just not
Yeah.
worth it.
It'll come back. It comes to Chicago pretty regularly,
Yeah. I
every
mean,
decade or so. I mean,
I think
yeah,
we were going to try to go to the North American Science Fiction Convention one year when Worldcon was out of the country, and that was the year my favorite author was supposed to be there, but of course it like conflicted with something else too.
there's always a conflict when we want to try to go to a sci-fi convention.
but anyway, we were talking about Worldcon. And Worldcon 1939, which was the weekend of July 4th. I think it was like July 3rd, 4th, and 5th, 1939. And this is kind of the single defining moment when cosplay first happened as we would define it as a convention costuming experience. And it's also the single event that started convention costuming thereafter. The two nerds, Forrest Ackerman, Myrtle, she was Myrtle Jones at the time. She was later Myrtle Douglas, so she's usually referred to as Myrtle Douglas, decided to show up dressed in costumes that were inspired by costumes from a science fiction film from 1936 called Things to Come, which was based on a story by H.G. Wells. And I love H.G. Wells, so I'm always just sort of floored by the idea that they were alive at the same time period as H.G. Wells was putting stories out. And I'm like, you lucky bastards. But they were made by Myrtle. It was probably Forrest's idea to make them. They were known in fandom and are usually referred to this day by their fandom names, Fori and Moroyo. Fori being short for Forrest, Moroyo being the Esperanto letters for her initials at the time, Mo, Ro, Yo. She was big into Esperanto and languages, so that's where she got that. And also a fun side note, they had fandom just like we do still today. Me going by Laughing Rat, you guys being Lovey, Elle, and Ash. It's just kind of a nifty little fandom quirk tradition
that's
thing
super
that we all put
interesting. When you
together.
said that, I was like, wow, I
Yeah.
totally didn't know that.
Yeah, no,
fandom aliases were kind of a thing back in the
they
day.
were very much a thing. People would publish under aliases in fandom publications. Fandom publications at the time were usually done out of people's homes. They were called zines. Usually pretty small, like pamphlet type deals where people would share their and they would share their own short fiction. They would share commentary, movie reviews, book reviews. They would have like letters to the editor. They would have letter sections where you would have like these slow burn months long fandom wars where someone would publish an opinion and then somebody would write back the next month and say, no, you're stupid and you're wrong and I'm going to tell you why. And then you would get the response and just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
So it's the original Twitter.
Original Twitter, yes. Yes. Flame wars like you would not believe. And this was
And 4chan.
It was more 4chan than Twitter, to be honest, because this was well, maybe a little less 4chan, because this was also the time period when the Nazis were kind of coming into power, and if somebody suggested you were a Nazi sympathizer, there was a pretty high chance that they were actually being serious about that at the time. So there was some interesting socioeconomic, sociopolitical things going on in fandom at the time. But tons of fun. Anyway, Fori and Moroyo, they wore these costumes. Fori's outfit was this bright green cape with these big pauldrons. It was like a shiny satin cape. He wore pants that were like World War I surplus, to which Moroyo had added a red stripe down the side. And he wore a bright orange shirt because color theory was not a thing at this time.
It hurts my fashion soul.
It just you're imagining this, aren't you? Yeah. And the pants would have been brown most likely. So just put that in your brain and just marinate on that for a little bit.
Yeah,
Moroyo's outfit, I really like Moroyo's outfit just in theory, because she had like this, it was like this cute little romper with like a little boy shorts and this cute little like pleated shoulder treatment. And it also had a detachable skirt that she could take off and turn it into a cape around her neck. So it was really cute. It had like this, it was two looks in one, and apparently was a bright red satin. My personal theory on this is that when you look at the costumes from the film Things to Come, they tended to be very, very short in the legs on the ladies, which was not necessarily well appreciated in fine company in the 1930s. Ladies did not show off their legs like that. So my theory is that she added that cape and that skirt to kind of maintain modesty when she was out and about in public. But when she was in the conventions, space, gams were out and she looked great. She had nice legs.
Kind of like how people this day still make alterations based on their comfort, or like you might make a garment that goes over your other garment because you have to walk outside and it's cold. Or it's just funny, like listening to you and all the things that you're talking about, like we still do.
Yes.
In the cosplay community, like it's still a thing, and it's wild to me that this was going on like all those years ago.
Right. Well, and I mean, and just like in fashion, having like a day to a night look is super fun. And then I'm just thinking of all like the quick changes that have like come back as being super popular in cosplay in the last like 10 years. So it just, the pictures were super cute. I loved her little romper with her little skirt cape.
I kind of want to remake that look for myself at some point, just for fun.
I think that would be super awesome.
You can add it to your list with Rami and Michelle's high school reunion.
Oh God, that's gonna be
makes
so
my heart
cute.
sing. That just makes me unreasonably happy. I love that movie.
If you're gonna be at C2E2, if you want to be our Alan Cumming and put on the fancy vest and the Vans, and I will throw this to Kelly. I'm sure she'll be down for it.
We're 100% going to C2E2.
We will absolutely do the time after time dance in the lobby at C2E2.
What?
Let's do it.
Okay, we might have talked about that later.
Message me.
I'll message you. Sidebar. Can we please reenact Rami and Michelle's high school reunion?
Please.
Is this streaming on anything? Because now I want to watch it again.
I don't know
Hulu right now.
Is it?
Yeah, it's on Hulu.
Excellent. I have Hulu.
What I'm hearing, Ash, is next time we get together, we're watching Rami and Michelle's high school reunion.
I mean, I'm down for this.
Okay. Such a good movie. But like their dresses remind me of like the like stereotypical like 60s, 70s sci-fi dresses.
Yes.
During that scene, the leather pleather looking shiny dresses with the fur on the bottom. Like
I think Michelle's dress, the blue one, actually just has just like a Star Trek insignia on the
It
front or
totally
something like
does.
that.
I'm looking at it right now.
yes, it just those dresses make me really happy.
Just they're
But
iconic.
I see them and then I think of like the bots in Austin Powers.
Yes.
Yes, the fembots. Yeah, Lisa
The
Lisa
fembots.
Kudrow's dress looks like a nightgown, and I love
It does. Oh, that movie was great. But I love that this like what we think of as like the stereotype of like the sci-fi outfit was a thing at one point in
Yes.
time. And so it just makes me giggle that like it's a stereotype now, but it did come from something. And it came
Mhm.
from like what all those old movies thought
Yes.
women would be wearing,
Mhm.
you know, in the future.
Ooh, and Star Trek
Ooh.
too. I mean, the entire
Star
aesthetic
Trek.
of Star Trek just created that entire aesthetic of even to today.
Blame
what do
Star
they-
Trek.
Blame Star Trek, for better or for worse, and mostly for better. Like, what do they call it? They call it it was the Star Trek costume designers theory, the Tice theory of titillation, was that the sexiest thing that a garment can do is completely cover all of the necessary bits, but look like it can fall off at any time. And he was not wrong.
He's not wrong.
He's not wrong.
Mean, and that is a fabulous theory,
Isn't it? I'm not sure he
that
actually
seems to
named it that, but
that seems to be the theory that anime prescribes to.
yes.
Sometimes literally.
Yes.
So then who are some of your other favorite early cosplayers besides the main duo here?
Well, like I'm a little bit of a Moroyo fangirl, just because she was kind of a badass. I really like, oh god, I had her pulled up here at one point. I'm just going to go to it is called the ICG archives, the icggallery.org, where you can find all of like the old masquerade photos from like costume cons and other
so anything that was ICG.
Yes, anything ICG.
I think we're in there somewhere.
You might be,
because GeekCon used to be ICG.
Maybe.
Oh, possibly. I'm not sure if they have GeekCon
I've spent
in
like
here
a
yet.
ton of time on that
We've never
website.
found it.
Yeah.
So.
I'm not sure if they have Geek. Oh, here she is. Her name is Denise Girardot, and I kind of love her. She may actually still be active, but in a lot of her older costumes, she does a lot of rainbow themed outfits. It seems like she did one where she was Iris, the Greek goddess of the rainbow. She did this other dress that was like I think it was just entitled Prism, where it was a quick change, where she starts off in this very wrapped up white gown, and then it opens up into this fully sequined, spangled Isis wing kind of rainbow dress, and is really cool, and I love it. There's this other one by Karen Schnellbelt that I absolutely love, and I am forgetting the name of it. I was looking for it earlier, but it is this outfit where it's like a black gown, but she has like the exhaust trail from a rocket ship going around the gown up her body, and then she has this massive like Philip Tracy style fascinator that is like a clouds and rocket exhaust, and then the flames from like an old school sci-fi 1950s sci-fi rocket ship going off of her head, and it's so cool. I love that outfit.
So it's really interesting because obviously when this started, from what it sounds like, it was a lot of like original takes and original designs.
A lot of original takes, a lot of original designs.
And it's really interesting to see how we're starting to come back around that circle right now.
Mm-hmm.
Where more and more of like the big costume competitions are encouraging original designs.
Which I would almost say might be for the better in the long term. Like at the time that, like, you know, if 40s, 50s, 60s, one of the reasons that they did so many original designs was that they just did not have access to media images. If you saw a movie, it was that one run in the theater for however many weeks, and then it was gone. It did not re-air on TV. Home video was not a thing until the late 70s.
They could not pause the video and try desperately to sketch out what was happening.
Not even a little bit. They could
return it to Blockbuster.
Yes. They could not screenshot things. And if you did even have print media of something, it was usually going to be in black and white just to keep costs down. So there was a lot more room for interpretation. People would do a lot more just fully abstract concepts. Like you might see someone dress up as like a beam of celestial light, or just like the music of the cosmos or something like that. You'd see all these weird, very abstract concepts, which were actually a lot of fun and so creative to see. Which is why I'm a little happy that we're coming back around a little bit on original designs and Gijinka and fan art designs and things like that, just because there is so much more room for interpretation and growth in that.
Yeah, I can see how sticking with something to make it quote unquote like screen accurate would be a little bit limiting as far as like design creativity, because if you're going for that accuracy component, then you don't quite have as much freedom to kind of play with your own vision of what something might be.
Speaking of design creativity, while I was going through your PowerPoint, I landed on a slide named The Turd. And I need you to tell our audience what I was looking at. We will put a picture of this thing in the post, but apparently this is one of the reasons why conventions have clothing requirements.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons. It's not the only reason, but it's one of the major reasons. The man, the myth, the legend. If you have been in cosplay competitions long enough, you've probably heard of him. I'm guessing this is not the first time either of you has heard of him. This was, oh darn, what was the year? 1974? 1972, 73, 74, right around there-ish. A gentleman by the name of Scott Shaw decided that he wanted to enter a costume contest dressed as a underground comic book character known as the Turd, who was a parody of Swamp Thing. But instead of being made of swamp foliage and whatnot, he was made of sewage and shit. It was delightful. The 70s were an interesting time.
I'm just so entertained that this photo is in color.
Oh god.
So then this is the one that used like peanut butter and stuff, correct?
Peanut butter, yes. Okay. Creamy peanut butter. I found that
creamy and not chunky.
Not chunky. Oh god, housekeeping would have.
I can't imagine with the con lights, like,
yeah,
melting.
So he slathered himself in a good inch or so of creamy peanut butter.
Oh my goodness.
Went through the convention space, got under the hot stage lights, and peanut butter being peanut butter, he just started to melt. He was oozing everywhere. I'm not sure if he got peanut butter on anybody else in the costume contest. He's still alive as far as I know, so I'm guessing he did not. But after the contest, he goes back to his hotel room. He's leaving peanut buttery footprints in his wake. He, by the way, was only in his underwear for this. So he is buck naked except for his skivvies, covered in peanut butter, walking through a hotel space, gets back to his hotel room, decides it's time to take a bath. And oh god. Ends up leaving a 2-inch thick ring of peanut butter in his hotel bathtub.
The poor housekeeping staff.
Oh, god, housekeeping comes in a minute. He apparently clogged up the plumbing for the entire hotel floor.
Not surprised.
Not even a little bit surprised. And when he apologized profusely to housekeeping, apparently housekeeping says, "It's okay, I've seen worse."
Wow. What? I don't want to know what was worse.
You know what? My very
hysterical.
first job was as a hotel housekeeper when I was like 15 or 16. And I only did it for like 6 months because the cleaning chemicals started giving me migraines. It actually wasn't that bad of a job, but I do have some stories. So I'm willing to believe her when she said that.
It's wild. It's just
Well, and of
such a
course, I'm
wild
like,
story.
he must have a super close friend to help him get this inch of peanut butter on the places you just can't reach by
I'm
yourself.
trying to imagine how he was doing it. Like, I was thinking of like how Roman gladiators, because I also have a class 6 degree, Roman gladiators would, when they got done with training, they would cover themselves with olive oil and they would take like like a stiff piece of bone or metal or something, and they would just scrape it off and do one of these and scrape it off and do one of these. And I wonder if he did something like that, or if he just tried to take a regular shower. I don't know.
I'm gonna guess this guy didn't plan far enough ahead for that.
I don't think he did.
I want to know how much all this peanut butter cost in today dollars.
Well, and we'd have to account for inflation too, but yeah.
Well, and then it depends. Do you have the like Sam size, peanut butter jars versus the regular ones?
I want to know more about 1970s peanut butter production now.
Right? Oh yeah, because it probably didn't come in gigantic sizes back in the 70s.
Probably didn't at that point.
So he probably had to buy a lot of jars of peanut butter.
A whole bunch, yeah.
Like a pallet.
Like a whole pallet of peanut butter. That,
he just walks into his hotel room with like 8 bags of just jars of peanut butter.
Right? Sometimes you just wonder why.
Maybe it came in a bag like milk.
Maybe. I don't know.
Elle, does this like story hurt the contest coordinator deep in your soul?
Yes. But it's funny because there still are contests, like joke as kind of as a joke will be like, you cannot cover yourself in substances, peanut butter, and I'm like, this is why.
We all know the rules exist because somebody somewhere did it at one point in time.
Yeah. Yes. There was also apparently a Twinkie incident sometime in the 80s. Where, and I don't know the exact details of this one, but apparently this was part of a performance where they force-fed somebody like a dozen Twinkies on stage. And those Twinkies did not stay down. They came back up on stage.
This is why there are rules.
I'm having flashbacks to the court of milk.
This is why we screen performances.
It was a different time.
Speaking of a different time, how did cosplay start being competitive?
Almost from day one, honestly. Yeah. So we had Fori and Maroyo, our grandmother and grandfather of cosplay, in 1939. 1940, they came back. They actually re-wore their 1939 outfits, and like a dozen other people dressed up as well. This was in 1940. Worldcon was in Chicago. And there were like a dozen people. They held an impromptu cosplay contest and then had like a little cosplay parade. I know the name of the winner of the contest. It was a gentleman by the name of David Kyle, who was dressed as Ming the Merciless from Flash Gordon. It was an outfit that we now would refer to as Yellowface, which was less of a concept at the time. Like it was, they were aware of it, but they didn't necessarily pay attention to it. But yeah, he won the first cosplay contest. He didn't actually win a prize. The first guy to win a prize was actually 1941. A gentleman by the name of Walter Doherty actually built a sort of spaceman suit out of surplus plexiglass. He worked in an airplane manufacturing plant for the war effort. So he took these excess scraps of plexiglass, made himself like a spaceman helmet and a cape and some pauldrons. They called it the $1,000 costume, even though I don't think he actually paid all that much for the plexiglass because it was trash. But he entered his outfit in 1941, and he ended up winning $3 whole, which when you account for inflation was, I think, about $55 in 2021 dollars. So I'd take it if I made a costume out of trash.
Yes, please.
And so then what were contests based on primarily? Like how they looked, or
it was a free-for-all.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a free-for-all
because
mostly.
it was still a free-for-all in like the early 2000s too.
Yeah,
So.
it was actually even more of a free-for-all than then, as far as I'm aware. They didn't have skill sets. So you didn't have the division of beginner and intermediate and master. They didn't necessarily base, as far as I'm aware, they didn't necessarily base a whole lot on craftsmanship, at least not up until like the 70s or 80s, I think. Because the 80s is when you start getting costume-specific conventions like Costume Con, and that's where craftsmanship standards really start getting solidified and becoming really, really important to the cosplay competition, the culture. But prior to that, masquerades were pretty informal. They were usually part of the Saturday night entertainment. They would have like a kind of like a evening social, a dance, a party, where the masquerade would be held as part of that, and you just go up on stage, you show off. It was probably a little more performance based than craftsmanship based, as far as I'm aware. And then you'd get your award, and then everybody would go on with having dinner and just getting plastered on Saturday night at the con.
We were born in the wrong decade, Elle.
Apparently. So we could have just gone and done a performance and then not done anything else.
And then had a booth party.
Just tangent, I looked up this dance because I forgot about it, how amusing it is.
The Romeo
and how overly dramatic.
Yes. Just full ballet posture.
And I'm dying right now. I was like, my ADHD kicked in and I need to look. It's like, oh God. So, if cosplay didn't start in Japan, when did it get to Japan and become like what we know now?
So, Japan's complicated. So cosplay started in Japan probably about the mid 1970s. And a lot of what I know about it is based on Helen McCarthy, who's a costuming historian. And according to her, Japanese fans kind of started costuming on their own without any real input from Western fans. It started a lot in some of the comic and manga markets, especially among college students, where they would get dressed up as their favorite comic characters. They would have, I think, at least one time they had like a full parade through the comic market of all these people in costume. But you don't really see a solidified cosplay culture developing until later in Japan. And I'm actually going to be checking my notes on this one because this is always kind of a little bit of a fuzzy spot. Okay, yeah, that actually covers most of what I have in my notes here. So we don't know a lot about the early roots of Japanese costuming. We do know one major figure in Japanese cosplay culture, a woman by the name of Mari Kotani, who is now a science fiction commentator and feminist author. She actually went to a Japanese science fiction convention with about 20 other costumed attendees, but her costume was kind of interesting because she was dressed as the main character on a cover of a Japanese edition of an Edgar Rice Burroughs novel. A Fighting Man of Mars is the novel. And the costume of this character on the book cover just happened to be almost identical to the main character of an anime called Umi no Triton. And Ms. Kotani was actually a really well-known member of the fandom of Triton. So people misinterpreted her outfit. They didn't see it as the Edgar Rice Burroughs cover. They saw it as Triton. And this was kind of the first time that you really see Japanese costumers thinking of anime as like a hard sci-fi fandom subject for costuming. Prior to this, anime and manga were generally kind of viewed as being for children and juvenile. But Kotani Mari just kind of accidentally brought in anime fandom into the sci-fi space, and suddenly anime starts moving into the Japanese costuming culture, in addition to more established sci-fi properties like Edgar Rice Burroughs or like, you know, Star Trek and anything else. So and then you it kind of goes on as it does in the US. And you get to about the mid 1980s, which is about when most people are aware of the beginnings of cosplay, because of a journalist by the name of Nobuyuki Takahashi, who wrote for a publication called My Anime. And most people will say that the word cosplay came out in 1984. That's actually incorrect. It actually was coined in 1983. I actually have the page somewhere where the word is first used. The word cosplay came about because the Japanese language didn't actually have a good term, a good native term for costuming, for fan costuming. They would try using the word kaso. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly because I know zero Japanese. But that word kind of implies a sort of an air of nobility that kind of doesn't really jibe with like zebra print bikinis and dressing up as Voltron.
What?
And they tried using the word masquerade, or the Japanese equivalent of masquerade, and that also was a little too stuffy. So they tried a couple of options. They tried stuff like a costume hero operation, and they tried just putting costume and play. And then Takahashi and his staff shoved together costume and play, and we got the portmanteau cosplay. And of course, the rest is history. We all know it. That's why we're here.
No, I'm just imagining people in their like super stuffy, like fancy attire, but with ridiculous,
the full
like,
Judy
prints.
Hitoe, and yeah.
I mean, we're all here because at some point back in the late 90s, early 2000s, we discovered cosplay.
Right.
And the adventure that was trying to cosplay way back then, which is honestly like its own episode in and of itself.
I know, it's really weird, like thinking back to like when I was first introduced to this concept and knowing what I know now. It's really odd to think about.
Because we're not kidding when we say that we got videos from Blockbuster and then had to pause them to figure out what was going on because you couldn't even Google anything. There was no Google, friends. There was no Google.
We had Ask Jeeves if we were lucky.
You could sometimes find fan-made websites that would take hours to download that might have some pictures on them, but
oh, and terrible just grainy scans.
Yes. Yes. And the awful wigs that you could sometimes get a hold of. That
if you were lucky during Halloween.
Lucky. Yeah, during Halloween, or we used to go up by one of the universities, had a costume shop, and we'd get wigs there, but they would be like horrendously expensive.
Oh,
yeah, pretty much just like party supply stores.
Yeah,
is really the only place I can think of.
Yeah, it's
and later
wild.
Beauty supply stores. There were a couple of those that had some wigs, but
I mean, in 20 years, it's wild how much it has changed.
Thanks, Jeff Bezos.
Right? Well, yeah. I mean,
CEO
now we can
entrepreneur.
Now I can get an entire Genshin costume for $160. Where, like, yeah, that wasn't even like you couldn't even buy a costume if you wanted to. It's just kind of wild. But with how much has changed in only 20 years, where do you think cosplay is going from here?
Oh God, it'll be interesting to see because of the pandemic. I'm interested to see what holds over and what doesn't. Personally, I think that it's my personal, and maybe I'm just, so I have maybe this childish hope that the general trend of history is towards the positive. So my personal belief is that cosplay is going to continue to become more accepting, on lines of race, gender expression, disability and accessibility. I think all of that is going to become better and better as we proceed further, because the internet has really just opened things up so much. Like you were talking about availability of resources, just what the internet has done for craftsmanship levels in just the last 20 years. I think in the next 20 years, it's also going to do that for cosplay, quote unquote, society or culture. It's just going to equalize things over time. Like there's so much negativity that you can find, and obviously there's always going to be that negativity. Like we mentioned the fan wars in the zines in the early 1900s. Like that shit's always been around, and it's always going to be around. But our tolerance level for it is steadily decreasing. So like I'm pretty sure that in the long term, what we're going to see is just an improvement of cosplay culture overall, and becoming a more welcoming, more accepting, and more progressive minded group. I'm also interested to see how the internet is going to factor into things like competition, because we saw some really interesting online competition options open up during the pandemic.
I know you did the Ultimate Cosplay Championship,
which I thought was really well run, and they had such a stellar panel of judges. They had fantastic entries from all across the world. Since they had so much extra time to judge people, it gave you an opportunity to really just create a full workbook. Like I saw some of the other contestants' workbooks, and they did like a full graphic design PowerPoint presentations about their costumes, or they could really dig into showing the judges all of the details and all of the work that went in. And that was actually really, really nice, thinking from a judge's perspective of being able to see all of that work that you can't necessarily see when you've got 2.5 minutes to interview somebody in a convention room, and you've been there for 6 hours, and you're hungry, and you've got a headache, and you've got to be on time for the start of the show in an hour and a half. So that was really interesting, and I'd kind of like to see some of that stick around.
Yeah, I was a little sad to see that they're doing it in person this year and not online, because I think it was a really strong thing what it had, doing it online and not making you go to a physical location, because it was able to incorporate the entire world.
Yes.
I'm curious to see if they still bring that version of the contest back. Yeah, I really liked what they did and how they did it. And I was actually kind of sad to see that you had to physically be in person this year.
Me too.
So I'm hoping they bring the old version back.
Yeah.
Because I think that gave an amazing opportunity for people who can't afford to travel to these big, expensive conventions in order to enter something of that caliber.
And you had such phenomenal international entries. Like you had Polygon Forge, who everybody knows now, who had the sculpted polygonal armor, which was amazing. They had the gentleman from Russia who had done a full suit of leather armor that he had sculpted and crafted by hand, and yeah, such cool stuff.
Yeah, and it's just unfortunate because now you're restricted to if you can go to Home-At, you're allowed to compete, which I think is going to change their contest a lot. And I'm really curious to see how it changes it and whether or not they like how it changed it.
Maybe they'll get big enough where they can do both options, because like it was such a neat experience to be part of.
Yeah, I wonder if they'll do like the online version still, but they're doing this like Home-At sponsored version right now. Just to give like in person. I thought maybe they were going to start doing like preliminaries or something and try to do like a crown deal, but that gets expensive.
Yeah,
so especially when you have 20 judges.
Well, and I really, like you kind of mentioned, I really liked the concept that they had going, where it was you had all this time and effort you could put into your whip books so that they could really dig down into what your actual, full picture of your craftsmanship was. And it did give everybody the opportunity all over the world to potentially compete against, which is very unique in that setting. I mean, as long as you had an internet connection available to you at some point so that you could upload your materials, then you were able to participate, and there were no other requirements for being anywhere at a particular given place and time.
Well, so the judging is staying the same. So they're doing all the judging online still, just like it was before. But in order to accept an award, you have to cross the stage at home at.
Huh.
Yeah.
Which, if you don't live near Florida, is not necessarily really doable for a lot of people.
Right.
Yeah.
So I thought it was really interesting that they're keeping their judging format because only like a portion of the judges are physically going to be at home at.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't win anything unless you cross the stage at home at.
So,
It's just weird. I don't know. I guess we'll have to see what. Because I was excited for what that competition may have opened up.
Yeah.
For the future of cosplay competitions and breaking that financial barrier to cosplay competitions. Because there's a massive financial barrier to competing, particularly in larger contests, because they tend to be at very expensive conventions.
Oh God, even if I thought I was ready for Crown, I would never be able to afford to go to some of the conventions that you have to go to.
Well, right, I mean,
to be able to compete.
C2's the most affordable one.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there's some smaller ones if you can go to like Pennsylvania or SuperCon in Florida. But yeah, I mean, and C2's an expensive con.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a cheap con to go to by any means. We get away with it because we tend to get programming picked up and then we get a free badge, or like we got a good deal on a hotel this year. But normally it's like, it was sticker shock the first time we went. With how much that convention cost us in comparison to some of the anime conventions we're used to attending. So, you know, with Crown being less expensive than ECCC or like NYCC, like, yeah, I mean, some of the Homat's not a cheap con to go to.
No.
Like, that's in tourist area. Like, Homat is not cheap to go to.
Not even a little bit.
You know, a lot of where the Fan Expo conventions are located are not cheap to go to. So, like, the bigger the con and the bigger the competition, the more expensive it's going to be to compete there. So you have to be able to physically get your butt there in order to do the thing. So what was cool was that was eliminated. Like, you didn't have to worry about the cost of physically getting yourself anywhere. You just had to like make your costume.
Make your costume, have it well documented, have somebody with a video camera who can get a minute or so of video for you.
Yeah, you didn't need 3, 4, 5 days off to make sure you could, because some of these contests are held on Sundays.
Yeah.
You know, so you didn't need all these days off. You didn't need like to fly anywhere. It was kind of nice.
Well, and we're still in a pandemic, and people, especially internationally, are going to be physically able to travel to the United States.
Right.
For this contest that otherwise could have been international still.
I mean, Art to Play just decided to only do Europe, so there won't be any outside of Europe contestants this year, which is a similar concept. You submit a portfolio and then they choose you off your portfolio to go to the competition in Europe, but they're closing it off to just Europe because they don't want people from outside coming in.
Trying to keep us plague rats out.
gotta keep the United States out. That's what it's all about. Let's be honest.
Not even a
Canada
little bit.
just let us back in,
and they're regretting it, I think.
Probably. We're hoping America's allowed in Spain by the time September rolls around.
Oh, fingers crossed.
I already have 3 vaccinations. Am I vaccinated enough to go to Spain? But yes, we hope Ultimate Cosplay comes back online.
Yeah, it would be nice.
We're seeing some expansion of some other contests. Fan Expo just bought a bunch of Wizard World contests or conventions, so ideally Fan Expo will expand. We won't see a lot of the internationals come back until the previous teams get to go.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice?
I don't want to add another number to this sign behind me.
More sticky notes.
When you do go, have some paella for me.
Yes. That sounds delicious.
I've always wanted to have real Spanish paella made actually in Spain.
Just eat all the food.
Just all of it.
My costume will be expandable so that I can eat all the food, because they have like organized events and like activities for you for like the entire like Thursday, Friday, Saturday at least.
Cool. Been
told by Wigwig Cosplay that it's a lot of food. And wine.
As long as it's good food.
Food and wine. I might be too toasty to compete by Saturday. Who knows?
What?
I'll have to watch how much Spanish wine I have. Well, thank you for coming on and chatting with us, and we'll
Anytime.
apparently see you at C2E2. I may have another
Apparently.
costume I need to add to my list now. I don't
You
know.
might now.
Oh no, how terrible.
I might have to just for the photo opportunities.
Just for the
alone.
photo op, like we would absolutely
I-
just.
Pretty sure I could use my Seiya wig for
Probably
his
could.
hair.
And it's just like a vest. I mean, you probably don't you have a Blathers vest? That would probably just work fine.
I do have a Blathers vest. I'm trying to figure out if it's like gold lame on the front of this vest, though, these polka dots.
Oh, yeah.
Or part
Oh
of
my
me thinks that
goodness.
it should be.
Mm-hmm.
And then I need to get, because it's like blush colored satin on the back and brown on the front. And I'm
Mhm.
pretty sure these, like, I'm not sure what they are exactly, but I'm going to have to find out, and we may have to cut them out of the cricket and I mean to stick them on a vest. Because I feel like that's a thing. It's got to be somewhat accurate, right?
Exactly.
I mean,
I mean, I have some gold HTV already.
right? Because they're shiny little, like, I think they're little, like, I don't know what they are. We'll figure it out. They look like little florets.
They
or
look
something.
like little bugs.
They're not bugs.
They look like bees or something.
My bags.
Or like the little like Lacoste alligators or something
Little
like that.
Lacoste alligators.
I'm pretty sure it's like a moth or something.
They might be bees, actually.
Actually, oh, you know what? Just having a bee vest, just to have a bee vest would be
I feel like a bee vest would also work for Blathers.
would
He hates them.
he
but
hates
it would
them,
work.
so he's covered in them.
It would work, I feel like.
Looking at
Yeah, that
bees.
might have to be a thing.
Are
You
they
might have
fireflies?
to
There's
make
there
that
clearly
happen.
some kind of bug motif
They're
going on here.
totally some sort
Anyway.
of
Some
insect.
sort of bug. But I feel like I need gold, shiny gold bug things on a brown vest, though.
Don't we all?
I mean, yeah. Who
well,
doesn't?
You say
kinda
that
do.
like it's a bad thing.
I know, but it's funny because I'm pretty sure I own everything else in this picture. Except for the black chucks. I don't have black chucks.
You know, I just love that Alan Cumming, gay fashion icon, just has this vest with tiny little gold bees or fireflies on it
Right?
in this movie where he is romancing a very straight woman. It's delightful.
Too funny.
Yes, I'm pretty sure I can make Seiya's wig do his hair.
Most likely.
'Cause I think his hair is black, not brown, but I'm not sure.
It's like a dark brown blackish.
Oh, then maybe Blather's wig.
Maybe.
I don't know. I might have to
So many
see what I can
options.
do.
We have just devolved this into just studying the costuming in Romeo and Michelle. And
that
I am
seems
not
appropriate.
Mad about it
I'm
at
not
all.
mad about it either, but I feel like I'm gonna have to do this just because I have to do it.
I'm still
Ah.
entertained at this concept of you cosplaying as a cosplayer from the 1930s.
Yes, Beth, please
gonna be
cosplay
fun.
as a cosplayer.
You know what?
from the
If nothing
1930s.
else, I should wear it
Cosception.
while I'm giving the panel, right? Like,
Yes,
Oh, and then you could just be like,
little
I'm wearing this dress.
homage.
Whap! It's a cape.
it's your uniform for your panel.
Yes, panel
Yes,
uniform.
panel uniform. We
I
have
have no idea
those.
what color her hair was. All of her photos are in black and white,
Does
so
this
I'm just
have
going to
to
have to
guess?
assume the brown is a pretty safe choice, I think.
It's a pretty safe choice.
Yeah.
Yes.
But like, no, we didn't. There were a couple of things. We didn't get to the 90s, did we?
No, but we might have to just talk about the 90s.
The
in its
90s may
own-
just be its own thing.
because
Yeah.
it's really its own thing.
Yeah.
There's so many adventures from cosplaying in the late 90s and early 2000s.
Yeah. I feel like
Back in my day.
I feel like I did not mention, because credit where credit is due. I was talking about
yes.
Takahashi and his 1983. He comes up with the word cosplay, but it doesn't actually catch on until like 1984, because he goes to Worldcon 1984 in Los Angeles, and he sees a group of American cosplayers dressed as anime characters from. It was billed in the U.S. as Star Blazers. In Japan, it was Space Battleship Yamato, which is still like a really well-known famous vintage anime, and apparently the American dub still holds up. It was really well done. But he saw these cosplayers, took their photos, went back to Japan, published them in My Anime, and that is the article that really caused the term cosplay to take off in Japanese cosplay culture. Because everybody saw this article about American fans dressing up as Japanese characters, and they were like, holy crap, we're famous, I guess. And it just, that's where cosplay as a term really started to disseminate through Japanese costuming culture.
Oh, gotcha.
Right?
Yeah.
Because words travel through societies like that, and it's cool.
true. The magic of print.
Yeah, language. It's a beautiful thing.
Yes. Well, thank you for gracing us with your knowledge.
You are welcome anytime. I'm not sure how much more I have to give, but
Yeah, we're
I
gonna
enjoyed this history lesson.
close out this episode, but thank you for the history lesson and the random tangents. I'm sure some of them will be gone out.
some of them will definitely.
But we've now tangented into me needing to make a Romeo and Michelle's high school reunion costume. So
And get the
figure out-
cricket and a little iron-on transfer, and it'll be great.
sounds good to me.
That
Yeah.
sounds
Well, thank you
fantastic to me.
again for joining us.
You are
Yes. So again,
welcome.
this is Beth Laughing Rat Cosplay. You can find Laughing Rat on Instagram at Laughing Rat Cosplay.
Laughing_rat
oh, yes,
on
that's right.
Instagram. Yes.
Underscore. I'll put it in the show notes.
The all-important underscore.
Yes. I will make sure I put it in the show notes so you can go and follow Beth and the rats on their adventures.
It's mostly the rats.
It's mostly the rats, but it's worth following just for them, honestly.
I mean,
They
they're
are
so
adorable.
cute.
it's the best of both.
You do get the best of both. You get a little bit of crafting and a little bit of ratties, and it's great.
But I'm Ash,
And I'm Elle.
and we are Vie Cosplay.
And this is Shit Cosplayers Say.